Thank you for tuning in to this interview with our special guest, who is a traveled, profound writer and author of a story sure to inspire generations to come. He is the author of this seasoned book that has been in the works for over 30 years. And yet it's a message that still speaks true to our modern world today. It's a story about one man's falling out with organized religion and his journey of mishaps and solitude while battling his mission and need for rescue in space. There is history, darkness, and hope pouring from these pages. And I'd like to thank you, Mr. Jan Steen, author of his recently published book, Against a Blackened Sky. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Hearing you talk about it makes me want to read it.
Well, good.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Oh, of course. You know, Jan, I've read your book and I want to tell you that I'm super impressed. I know that this is your first book that you've written, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you can imagine, I just have so many questions I want to ask you. And I'll say before we begin that I've never read a story nor heard one quite like the one that you've told. And I'm just dying to ask. I know when the book was written, I've done the math. You've left so many of your readers wondering if you could write this story over the span of decades, then how did you make it still so current and so deeply inspiring to this day? I mean, there's a passage in the book where you talk about the Berlin Wall.
There is, yes. Well, the story was written, as you said, and it's really almost like 39 years ago now, which is long before the Berlin Wall did come down. I wrote the book when I was still fairly young. I was in my 20s when I actually wrote.
That means that you wrote about the wall coming down numbers of years before it actually did.
Quite a bit of time before it actually happened.
Yeah.
And there was, back when I was quite young, and I did allow a few people to read it.
Like friends?
Oh, yeah. Of course, because, when you put yourself out there like that and you're wondering, is this any good at all? Do you have any feedback?
What did they say?
Oh, well, my friends were, of course, very complimentary and supportive.
Good.
The one thing that this is something, because every one of them came to me and told me, almost like they're taking me into their confidence, like, are you crazy or what? But they said, the Berlin Wall will never come down.
Did it throw you off?
Well, you'd think it would, but actually, for me, I just told them that I was pretty sure that it would. And for me, what I thought was, well, if that is the one thing that you find...
You're doing pretty well.
It made me feel, if that's your criticism, I'll take it. Because that's really not too bad to hear something like that.
Right.
So that was kind of the thing, but
tell me about what happened when years later the wall did come down.
Well, when the wall did come down, it was kind of interesting because of one of who had been young like me at the time that I wrote it and who had read it, one of the few, who had also told me that it wouldn't happen, was at that time back in the university finishing up his degree. Mm-hmm. And so he told his history professor at that time that he knew someone who had told him that the wall would come down and who had even written about it in a book that it would happen. Mm-hmm. And so his professor didn't call him a liar, but what he did do was in front of the whole lecture hall, I know because he told me this story, and he thought it was humorous. He said the professor told him that he didn't believe it because back then nobody knew.
No one did know though, right?
Well, see, now you know what it feels like to be me. Because when I wrote about it, no one would believe me that it was going to happen. When it did happen, no one would believe that I wrote about it before it happened.
But there are other instances in the story where you discuss things that are current, despite the fact that the book was written over 38 years ago. How old were you when you wrote this?
I was still in my 20s when I wrote it.
Wow. How long did it take to write?
Well, if I wouldn't have started out with pen and ink.
Pen and ink. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, it's just one of those things. If I had known then what it took to write a book and see it through to fruition,
yeah, it does.
I probably would have never started.
You know, it does seem like it took a long time to wait for publication, and a lot of things probably could happen to the manuscript in that time. You probably kept it safe somehow.
Well, actually, the manuscript was lost for over 15 years during that 38 years or 39 years that it was there. And
where did it go?
Well, what had happened is we were living on Kauai at that time, or not at that time, but we were living on Kauai. And I had, eventually we got a Tandy 1000 EX and floppy disks, daisy wheel printer so that I could submit it. And after about a year of rejection, I quit, which I know was a mistake to quit. But anyway, so I had about 4 or 5 copies that I had printed on that printer. And when I gave up on, then they slowly began to disappear. A friend had come to visit us in Kauai who was from Montana. He ended up leaving there with a copy, which I completely forgot I'd even given to him. And so what happened is that was our last copy.
You didn't have to rewrite it? Pen and paper?
Yeah, no, that wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
That was not going to happen. But 15 years later, he was doing a remodel on his house, and he discovered the manuscript, on a shelf, and that's when he read it. And then he decided he needed to get it back to us. So he sent it to our last known address, which was Kauai, at which by then we were living in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands and had been living there for 3 or 4 years by the time.
You've traveled so much.
We've been around a few places, mostly tropical locations,
right.
But not always.
And then you ended up in Myrtle Beach.
I like Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
Don't you?
It's not bad. We love it here.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he contacted his mother, whose daughters knew my sister, and it's a long story, but nonetheless, through the daughters and my sister, he got our contact information.
It's amazing. And it actually came in the mail.
Yeah.
What did you think when it finally arrived, or when it got to you?
I thought that it was meant to be.
Aw.
Because when he had read it, and when he called us and asked us, he apologized for having had it so long. And I realized real quickly, and I told him, I was actually glad that he had not returned it years earlier, because then we might have lost it for real.
Wow.
And so I think that what happened is he actually turned out to be the guardian of the manuscript, because there's no way I could have found it. I didn't even know it was still in existence. In fact, when we lived in St. Croix, I met 3 people who had books published, and I was thinking, it's a shame that that's lost to me. But like you said, I wasn't starting over with pen and ink. I wasn't going to do this all over again. So I figured it was, to answer your question, it was meant to be, is what I think when it came.
Just a great turn of events. And it really makes me wonder what possessed you in the first place to write the story. Because, I mean, a lot of the events that you talk about, they didn't happen. You wrote it, then they happened. It's almost like it's prophetic.
Well, I wouldn't use the word prophetic myself, because I did not write the book to foretell the future.
Then what was your intention?
I could give you a real long explanation, or I could give you an illustration that I think would answer that probably better.
Yes.
You'll take that. I wrote it because I was born in Texas.
Texas. Cowboy.
Yeah, old cowboy. Big time. Yeah, Texas was, especially back then, Texas was like the Wild West. It was the Wild West. But at that time in Texas, you could get a driver's license at age 13.
For your horse.
As young as 13. So my sister got her, yeah, I know. I tried to ignore you saying that, but I'm still proud of Texas.
Yeehaw, all
Just because
right.
I like Myrtle Beach too.
So you got the driver's license,
Well,
not for the horse.
My sister got her driver's license when she was quite young.
Okay.
And so,
for a car.
Yes. Well, either that or you could drive a tractor.
Oh.
I think they'd let you drive a tractor even when you were younger, but without a license. But
That's a story for another day.
yeah, I think so. But at any rate, so her and my middle sister and myself would jump in the car and drive to another town 15 miles away that had a movie theater, go to the movies, go to the Charburger, all of those kind of things. Unchaperoned. Wow. So you can imagine a kid that age driving a car. A lot of states then said, look, you're going to have to change this law because it's not working for us, because states honored other people's driver's licenses. Anyway, there was one time I remember and this time my mother happened to be in the car with us. She was in the passenger seat.
Right.
This is West Texas. It never rained. That day it did. The streets get really slick out there when it rains.
Uh-oh.
So an incident occurred and cars are skidding and sliding and all kind of ugliness going on. But my sister, she took the steering wheel, she just like this, and brought that car off to the shoulder and straightened it out. And she didn't even lock up the brakes. Even in the gravel, she never locked up the brakes. She just applied the brakes, brought the car safely to a stop beside the car that had been in front of us. And the car that had been behind us skidded and came within inches of hammering the car that had been in front of us. So you can imagine all of the things that could have happened.
Right.
So in the meantime, none of us are saying, it's just like, what just happened? And so things cleared up and my sister brought the car back on the road safely. And we hadn't gone a mile and my mother, I guess it dawned on her something.
She said, write a book.
No, she should have said, never write a book. But what she did is she looked at my sister and she said, what made you think, because it was like instantly, quick, what made you think so quickly to do what you did? And I'll never forget, my sister said, I thought about it in advance. What would I do if this ever happened? Wow. And that is what I think we all need to do, is we need to think, if this ever happened, what would I do?
Wow. Now, I want to talk about your story. It revolves around a man's pursuit of peace, security. And there's some heavy weight to these words. And I know in the story there's challenges had between faith, enhanced technology, and only realizations that time would allow. So you also mentioned in your story that there's a power coming.
There is a power that is coming.
Okay, coming to
the earth.
This sounds ominous.
What would you do if it did?
Now I feel like I'm being interviewed. Well, could you maybe at least tell me one thing that will happen for sure in the future?
In the future. By that, I would assume you mean something that is not in the book?
Yes.
Okay, something that's not in the book, and probably something that is in the not too distant future. Otherwise,
right. There
how would we
no point
check on it?
Right.
Okay. How about this? Within our lifetimes, you will be required to carry a monitoring device that will track your every movement and will be capable of monitoring your every conversation, and there will at that time never be another private, you're shaking your head. There'll never be another private conversation after that time, after that happens.
It sounds a little...
Far-fetched?
Yes.
I thought you might say that. What if I could show you a prototype?
Sure. Okay.
It would look something like this.
Well, you got me on that one because I know the phone already has all these capabilities.
Well, it's not I that has you, although you have been had.
I'm sorry that I asked.
You'll be more sorry if other people do not begin to ask, and if they don't begin to ask very soon before it is too late.
So what are you suggesting that we do?
Well, I can give you the words of a man who was far wiser, and I will say far more courageous than I am.
All right.
It's found in the book of Joshua, chapter 24. You're shaking your head. 24 and verse 15. And Joshua says, "Choose ye this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Yes.
Very nice.
So my suggestion, I would add to that, I believe, do not wait until the day of to make that choice. People who put off choices put them off because they're afraid to make the right choice. So my suggestion is do not wait until the day of to make that choice. Make that choice while it is still your choice to make.
I see. This is why you told the story of your sister and a driver's license.
Because she thought about it in advance. What would I do? When it happened, she knew what to do.
All right. Well, this is the story. It's called A Blackened Sky. It's insightful. It's provocative. It is not prophetic. It does not tell the future, unless it does. But I want to thank you so much for being here today with us, Jan. And I also want to let you know there's parts of the story that made me laugh, that made me cry. I stayed up at night reading it, and there's no part of the story that I would suggest that you would leave out. So I want you to know I would most definitely read this again. And I'm once again so grateful to meet you. Amazing author, amazing traveled, known author. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And thank you for your kind words also. Thank you very much.
Of course. Whether you choose to believe it or not, these things are happening against a blackened sky. This book can be found online or wherever better books are sold.